listeners. I am Nisham, and this is World's Creative Identities. At each episode, I will be speaking with someone who is passionate about truly seeing others for who they are. Journalists, documentary makers, therapists, designers, teachers, HR experts, and so many other types of empaths who are able to celebrate our unique identities and creative expressions. Today, as you can see, I have the great pleasure of being with Dionne Maxwell, Director of Diversity, Belonging and Engagement at Jungle Creations, founder of the online magazine Amplified Kin, offering career and lifestyle advice to Black and ethnically diverse people. And she also happens to be a great speaker that I saw online 2 years ago. And she taught me to replace the word inclusion with belonging, and I've been repeating it as a parrot to anyone who listened ever since. So, hello, Dionne, and thank you for accepting my invitation. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm glad that something that I said, even though it was a few years ago, still resonates.
Oh, it did. Sometimes one teaching is all we need to stay with someone in our lives. And of course, you said many other very interesting things, and I really liked your energy. So I'm so happy to be with you this morning.
Thank you.
So maybe we can start with getting to know you a little bit, because as this is called Worlds, I'd like the first part to be about your world a little bit, and then we can get into talking about how we like to discover other people's worlds. So where did you grow up? Where are you from? Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I am from North London. My family, so my heritage ancestry is from Jamaica. Both parents are Jamaican, and my grandparents came here in the 60s, I think. And I'm first generation Black British, but my ancestry is Jamaican.
Mm-hmm.
Whole family grew up in North London, still mostly live in North London. I think a couple people live in East London, but everyone still lives in North London. So my household is very much a mix of West Indian and British culture. So one day you could be eating Saturday soup, which is like not ackee, you don't have ackee in soup, don't ever repeat that, but you have like choco, dumplings, yam, etc. And the next day you could be eating fish and chips and really craving a cup of tea, which if you're in Jamaica, you're probably not craving tea so much because it's quite here.
Yeah.
Definitely crave the tea.
That's so nice. It makes you want to just randomly come and ring the bell and see what's cooking today. And did you grow up visiting all the places that your family is from, or did you grow up in London?
Mostly grew up in London. Went to Jamaica a few times when I was younger. I think the first time I went, I was about 8, between 8 and 10, don't remember. And then went more or less every other year after that. So my grandparents moved back out there about when I was about 8. So we've got a family home in Jamaica. Unfortunately, they passed away in 2006, but we still have the home there. So family still out there, as well as across like the US and Cuba and stuff as well. But yeah, mostly grew up in North London.
Okay, that's so nice. And so I'd like to ask questions about maybe those memories in Jamaica too. But as you mostly grew up in London, how were the best moments of your childhood? Like, I'd like to know what was making you happy when you were a kid, like what you like to play or how you like to spend your time, because that tells us a lot about how your mind functions, how your heart vibes to something.
When I was really young, I think what I remember, me and my cousins are very similar in age. So I've got one cousin that is 8 months older than me, then another cousin that's maybe a year younger, another cousin that's a couple of years younger. But my sister is actually 7.5 years younger than me. So I remember a lot of hanging out and playing with my cousins. And one of the games that we used to always play was like pretend the floor is lava. So and that you could only do that if your mum or your dad wasn't in the room, or like they were upstairs and you were downstairs, and we would on the sofa pretending that the floor is lava, and whoever dropped off the sofa would be like, oh, you're dead, and then they'd have to be out until the out. And I also remember like watching TV and putting a towel on my head, pretending that I had really long hair, and singing. My favorite cartoon at the time was Gem, which was an 80s cartoon, and there was like Jem was the main lead singer, and then there was this. She was like also like a superhero or something, like a crime fighter or something. So I pretended that I was Jem and would be singing along to Jem. I also thought that Whitney Houston was my aunt in my mind. I loved Whitney
Oh,
Houston
great.
so much, so I just like she is part of my family. Whitney Houston's album was like one of the first records, so actual records, vinyls that my mum bought for me. That and Bobby Brown, and I would rinse it. I would play it all the time, all the words to Greatest Love of All, and would sing along to it. So I really decided at that point that I wanted to be a singer, and would sing. And then when I went to secondary school, did music. So I did piano as well as singing lessons and violin lessons. So I really liked music. Also did dancing, lots of dancing, so ballet, tap, gym and stage. Did lots of swimming lessons, did gymnastics. I think my mum was just trying to keep me busy so that when we got home that I would be tired.
That's a smart mom.
Had a very active childhood, so I remember very fondly playing with my cousins, and me and my cousins are still really close now.
Oh, that's great.
Very active. I don't sing necessarily anymore. I think when I left school kind of stopped that, but still sing along in my house when no one's listening.
Oh, I almost wanted to ask you to sing a song for us. Maybe we'll get to that. But I love it because everything you just told is so like immersive, like such a imagination world. Like you can be someone else and your family can grow and let in Whitney Houston and like all these people. And it's just such a capacity of making yourself happy, I'd say. Also, that's really nice. And I mean, one of the things I really liked in my childhood was with Indiana Jones, and when you talked about the lava floor, I could see myself in it too.
Yeah, I think when you was a kid, like your imagination was just allowed to run wild, so there was no limits.
Yeah.
To visualize, see, be, and or do. So you wanted to be everything. You didn't have that kind of facade of adulthood where you have to deal in reality. You were just able to just see it, believe it, do it, whatever. There was no limits to your imagination, which I miss that as
yeah, it's so nice. But I have post-its that remind me of that in my room. I'm like, remember to be exactly what you want. Like, just have fun with it, play with it, and yeah, I guess we do get tired at times when we're like we get older or we try things and some people tell us that no, you can't be that, and then we're like, oh right, like and start believing them, but nah, we should go back and learn from those kids. No, it's so nice, but yeah, I think people who like you have these types of imagination think it's given to everyone, but I think there are other types of characters who like I just see my nieces and one of them can imagine these types of things, and the other one when you're like, what's the name of your doll, she's like, I don't know, but she lives in this type of house and she just designs the environment around her. So it's really cool, but I really like this these types of memories. And so, what made you interested in others? Like, is it through your own personal experience through time that you started to think, I want to talk about and work in these types of topics? And is there anything you experienced as a child, teenager, or is it more in your adult years? What made you leave the dreams of music and change this path?
Well, the dreams of music was mainly when I was at school, so secondary school, we had like this really lovely music department, and my music teacher, Mr. Desmond, who I adored, he was a great music teacher and he really encouraged you to express yourself musically. So at school I was part of a girl band called Levante, and we had this song called I Want to Be More Than Your Friend, which we performed at like a school end of year concert, and everybody loved it, and it made me feel like, oh, I'm Beyonce. Well, at the time
Yeah.
there was a 90s girl group, R&B girl group called Total. So there was three of us and we thought we were Total. And when it came to finishing my A-levels, I wanted to just go to work, but my mum was really adamant about me going to university. So I chose a topic that I thought I would enjoy, which was music and media management, because I saw myself, or I wanted to work in the music industry. But I had absolutely no idea how to get into it, and going to university was partly to go along with my mum's plan. And I was the first person in my family at the time to go to university, so I understand now why that was important for her. At the time, I just thought, who cares? Like, this isn't. I don't want to do that. But also, going to university meant that you prolong not having to go to full-time employment, so that was probably a good thing as well. You get to enjoy your youth a little bit more without worrying about money and bills and stuff. But being at uni, I naturally gravitated towards doing events, and I really enjoyed staging events, and realised I had a knack for project management and talking to people. And then when I got my first job, which was at the local council, so it was Islington Council, I kind of developed an understanding of community engagement and speaking to different people from different demographics and how they were affected by different policies, different government legislation, how life was completely different. So you just kind of assume when you're growing up that everybody has a similar life to you. And my childhood was fine. Like, I didn't have any real things. I was very determined. So if I wanted something, I would work my hardest to make sure that I was able to get it. I remember one time I wanted a pair of LA Gear trainers, which I'm showing my age here, but it's okay. I wanted these LA Gear trainers so badly, and I wrote a petition, and I got everybody in my school, in my class, to sign this petition so that my mum would buy me the LA Gear trainers. Who does that?
I love it. I love it.
So I just had this like sheer ambition and determination for whatever I wanted. It was like I thought I could just do it and could have it. There would be a workaround in some way. And I think I just assumed everybody had a very similar upbringing to myself, and then working in a local authority, you realize that people don't. People have completely different experiences, whether they be way higher on the socioeconomic food chain or way lower on the socioeconomic food chain. There was completely different life experiences out there, and I felt like at that time I was quite sheltered to that. And working in a local authority, you find out how people construct policy, so how why governments make decisions and how they make decisions and how they affect people, whether positively or negatively. And I started to see patterns for specific groups and for specific demographics that started to really pique my interest, shall we say. So for most boroughs, if there was areas that were considered to be deprived or from a lower socioeconomic background or from a different ethnic background, the way in which they would communicate to those groups was completely different to how they would communicate to people who were from more affluent backgrounds or who were in predominantly white areas. And I started to see that actually there have been limitations put in place for different people. So you've been put in a box. So I'll speak for myself, if you're a Black woman, these are the careers that you should be going into. These are the careers that you're exposed to. This is the kind of lifestyle that you should be aiming to achieve. And because I didn't grow up thinking that way, I grew up thinking I could be whatever I wanted to be. When I started to go into the working world, I realized, boy, everybody doesn't think that way. Everybody doesn't think I can be what I want to be, as in me, Dionne. And then other people don't even know the possibilities of the lifestyles that they could have or how they could change things because they've been put in a box by somebody else. So I think working in a local authority really piqued my interest for that, because I saw the big difference in how people were treated and felt like it was unfair, particularly even at school when you speak to careers advisors or when you talk about the things that you want to do when you grow older. Most people were saying the same thing. So most people wanted either followed their parents' requests. So they were going to go to university, then they were going to get a job, but that was a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or something that was very traditional because that's what their parents understood. And their parents felt like if you get a good job, you'll have a good life, etc. So they didn't even consider or weren't really aware of like the vast opportunity of different things they could do, explore, see, or anything like that. And I felt like, that needs to be changed because the limitation isn't a narrative that you've created, it's a narrative that has been enforced upon you. So how do we form our own narratives for our own lives?
Yeah, it's also the beliefs that shape up, because I had this experience myself, and I only realized my limiting beliefs years later, because I'm a Turkish woman, but I grew up in Luxembourg, and I was a foreigner all my life. So I was always the different one. And so when I finished the university exams, the day before the results, I was still expecting to maybe not pass. And that's why I didn't even think of applying to some types of schools. And then I realized I was top of my class. And I don't think even then I thought about all the other schools I could have applied to. I had put myself in a really little box. And I think it took me years and years to realize that I had the same worth as anyone in the rooms I was in the companies I was in. And each time I was let somewhere in, I was feeling like, wow, I should be so grateful. And it took me to get into my 30s to realize that, hey, that was all just something I was made to believe. Of course, no one ever just came to tell me this is your box, but it's the whole construct, whole structure of culture in which you grow up. And it's so precious that you used the fact that you weren't put in a box all your childhood to bring that sight to others. And actually, something else you had said at that conference that really touched me was that it's not all about just trying to create quotas, and that you didn't want to be a quota. And I always grew up feeling this. I was like, I don't want to doubt if I'm in this room because they had to statistically put someone from Asia or someone from another country in this place. I want to know that I'm good, and I want others to know that I'm good. And so, yeah, you say many interesting things. And can you tell us a bit about your the Amplified Kin magazine? What's happening there?
Yeah. So I started when I worked at Hearst magazines. I was diversity and belonging lead there. You noticed again, because it's private sector and it's more around glitz and glamour and entertainment, etc. You noticed again that there were different people were trying to get into industries or trying to get their voice heard. And then when diversity and inclusion started to become a popular topic amongst organisations, the focus always seemed to be on grassroots, entry-level apprenticeships, trying to get people in at the very junior positions. And they would negate the people that already worked in the industries. So as much as it wasn't high volumes of people, there were still people there. And I really wanted to do something that would amplify the professional voices of people that already existed in industries. Because most of the time they would have had to fight, or they would have had to change something about themselves in order to get in, because people weren't even thinking about how, like, the perception of different demographics or how people experienced working life from a different lens. So I really wanted to do something that amplified their professional voices, as well as kind of create opportunities for people to share experiences, speak through kind of concerns, and progress their own careers within different industries. So Amplified Kin really came about from, initially it was just a network, and it was just people from different businesses coming together that were in the entertainment industry, coming together and talking about their experiences, that then turned into an event, that then turned into regular meetings, that then turned into a website where people can go and find information on how to level up their career, how to have difficult conversations, how to search a job, how to pivot, how to change from one industry to another, how to really use your strengths, all without really masking who you are. And the thing about that is we're still in a position where we are asking to be included, but we're not realizing that we're not accepted. So in order to be included, most of the time you have to wear some kind of mask. And that might come up with your customer service voice. That might come up with you changing your name so it's easier for your colleagues to say, or that might be you not showing parts of your culture that are traditional to you because you are fearful that somebody won't understand it and then they'll put you in a box because of it. So I really wanted to change that narrative and give people the opportunity to look more for acceptance than inclusion, because you could go into a job, you could be in a room, you could be sitting at the table and you feel like you're included. People might ask your opinion, you say something. So if they're talking about, I don't know, hair care, and they want to go with a specific brand, I have completely different hair to everybody else in the room. So can I talk about hair care from my perspective, or do I need to think about hair care from your perspective? Are you thinking about hair care from my perspective? So the inclusion is one thing, but the acceptance is a thing that I really want us to be able to really like feel like belonging and acceptance. Like diversity and inclusion is like you're present, you're here, but belonging and acceptance is like my opinion matters, my experience matters. You understand my experience in the same way that I understand your experience, and that it isn't just me fighting for my voice to be heard or being included in the room. Like it's just a natural thing. You can see a picture where certain demographics are not included. I don't need to be the person that points it out because everybody realizes, hold on, there's no black people in that picture, or there's no men in that picture, there's no women in that picture, there's no disabilities in that picture. How do we change that, moving from, you know, just being included to actually being accepted?
Yeah, I think that that's really key, because most of the times you don't even think they're interested. Like even if they wouldn't be against you, you feel like they just pause and look and listen for a moment, and then they keep going with the conversation that they understand. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how you can make people pause and see things from your point of view when they never had to be the person who feels different in the room. And yeah, it's all these little things we do to not bother people. Also, you just like, you want to mingle, you want to, and yeah, this is really something that we need to change, not just the narrative, like you say, like show people, talk with them, create the space. And in your experience, have you ever felt in a moment where you were meeting someone who was really different to you and you were like, oh, I'm learning right now that I could have said something that would have been hurtful, and I'm learning that I should pay attention to these insights, to these topics, because listening to you, it feels like you would never make any mistake talking to anyone. But I'm sure you also must have had some learning moments. Can you share like an anecdote or a moment where you learned?
Of course. Like my favorite saying is Beyonce wasn't built in a day, and I
Great.
I'm constantly learning. I think there are things that you grow up with as normalities. So the way in which your parents talk, the way in which people talk to you, you grow up as if things are normal. So back in the day, there were certain phrases that were normal for people to say, but you didn't realize that they were offensive at all, whether that be describing people from a mixed heritage background, like half caste, something that people used to say all the time, but you later learn that actually it's offensive. You shouldn't be using words like that. That's not kind. It's not nice. In the same way, coloured used to be appropriate at some point because it was better than the N word, but it's still offensive. It's still not. Like there are always phrases, words that change and evolve, and you have to be open to that. And I think my biggest lesson most recently has been around neurodiversity and understanding how people perceive information, how people like to be communicated with, and how sometimes you don't consider that there are other ways for people to communicate or receive information. And I was working with somebody who gets very overwhelmed when they don't know like the agenda for the meeting. They're not sure what's going to happen. They feel they don't like the surprise or the spontaneity of certain things, and that affects their performance at work. So you thinking to yourself, I know we're going to do like a group exercise, we're going to try and get people together, we're going to make it a surprise and try and make, but that won't work for everybody. And doing it and then speaking to people afterwards and getting feedback and them saying, you know, I felt really overwhelmed, I felt very uncomfortable, I actually went and had a cry because I didn't know what was going on. That made me feel really bad because I didn't consider it from another perspective at all. And it meant that I needed to work on how I engage with people who see things differently to the way that I do, outside of traditional ways of communicating, just because I find that easier. In the same way, people with disabilities. So recently I was diagnosed with epilepsy as an adult, so I didn't grow up with it. And it made me also see that the way in which people communicate with me about me having epilepsy or me having seizures, like they didn't know what to say, they didn't know how to say things. And I think I'm quite a patient person, so I don't expect everybody to just know, because most of the time I'm figuring it out. But for some people who are from different demographics or experiencing life differently, they don't necessarily feel like they want to be the teacher. They don't want to have to train you on how to communicate with them, or how you should be more aware of difference. But because of my job, I need to be more aware that everybody doesn't get it straight away. There are ways in which we've been brought up. There are lessons that people have been taught in childhood that mean for them certain things are normal. And I think for me, learning, it's a constant learning. Like life is a journey. There isn't like, oh, now I know everything. I don't think there would ever be a point where you're like, now I know everything, now I understand everything. Things are constantly evolving. People are being more aware of how they feel about things, of how things affect them. There's more research done on words that we use, on ways we engage with people, and how old school traditional thinking has actually created trauma in some people. So like, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. I will still say things wrong. But I think the real learning curve is how you deal with it afterwards. So if somebody has told you, this made me feel uncomfortable, it's not about you in that instance. It's about that person. So to get immediately defensive, because your personality might be, you've never really taken criticism very well, or you've never learned how to say sorry properly, or to take on somebody else's perspective. That could be a you thing. And that might be something that you need to work on. It's definitely something I needed to work on. But it's realizing that it isn't about me in that situation. It's about me learning and understanding somebody else's perspective so that I can be better the next time. And I think a lot of people are still, some people aren't even trying to navigate that at all. They're not even trying to learn. But some people are trying to learn. And that's the best way in which you can work with people and constantly evolve and constantly learn, just by being open and realizing it's not just about you.
Yeah, and it's so precious when someone actually knows what they need and have the capacity to formulate it, because so many people, like before you were talking about neurodiversity, I believe like most of the things are not diagnosed, and many people see the way they are as drawbacks because that's how people reflected to them. And so a lot of people are feeling vulnerable and alone and going through so many roller coasters in a day. So when you come across someone who's capable of telling you, look, when you do this, this is always going to hurt me because I'm a certain type of way, and how can we do it differently? It's just so precious. But as you said, growing up, I guess we all had little or bigger traumas, and like everyone has these impulsions to react, to defend themselves. But I feel like we're in a very exciting time in the planet right now, learning so much. Like we're like little kids all going to school at the same time. So but a friend of mine taught me the difference between calling out and calling in. And what you were saying, I think it's a huge difference, like the intention, taking into consideration that the person wasn't trying to hurt. But maybe you were talking about epilepsy. What did it, if you're comfortable talking about it, what did it change in your daily life, and what types of needs may you have when you're with people in a room?
So I was diagnosed properly in September last year. Well, October last year, because I'd had a series of seizures. And what that did for me was, because I don't know what caused them, I don't know what the triggers are, they could literally happen at any time. It brought on a form of social anxiety for me. So I I do go out, but I don't go out really. Like, so I will only go out with my family because I reckon I reckon they'd be scared, but I reckon they could handle it if I had a seizure, or very close friends at the moment. So, and I don't tend to leave the house, and I've been really, really fortunate that I've been able to work from home since having them while I adjust to medication and stuff. But the fear of having a seizure and not knowing, like, there's nothing really beforehand, like trying to journal it and be conscious of what the triggers have been hasn't really helped, because initially I thought it was like if I was really tired I could potentially have a seizure, or if I was hungry, like there wasn't a consistent thing that happened, and I wasn't sure, is
no pattern.
there was no pattern. So that has made me really anxious, and I think has made me really not live in the way that I was used to living. But then I also am very spiritual, in that I think, well, actually I don't even know if that's spiritual, but I think that you can hold trauma in your body, and there may be things that I'm not addressing or I'm not dealing with that then comes out in a specific way, so that could create stress, which then creates seizures. So me trying to really listen to myself, listen to my intuition, listen to my body, be mindful of the things that I'm putting in my body and what I'm eating, and just taking time for myself and being selfish with that time has been a real learning curve for me. I wouldn't say that I'm a people pleaser at all. I think I can set healthy boundaries, but having to understand that the boundaries now are going to have to be different because actually I'm going through something has been like a work in progress. Because I was going to say I'm still young. I'm not actually that young, but I still want to live life in a way that I feel comfortable. But I'm very mindful that I have seizures, so that is going to look different. And the things that the doctor tells you to be cautious of, so like even crossing the road, like don't stand at the edge of the road in case you feel like, oh my god, or don't walk between cars when you're trying to cross the road, or if you're going to get on the train, make sure you're standing 3 feet back from the edge of the platform. And you're just like, if you do that in London, you're never going to get on the train. So
of course,
that's really going to work. But yeah, I think adjusting to it has been difficult, but then also explaining it to other people. Everybody has been, so far has been very understanding. But I think, again, it's like talking to me now. If I didn't tell you that I had epilepsy, you wouldn't know. So there isn't, when you have that in your head and you have a fear of something, the way in which you move changes, the way in which you do things changes. And unless you have that conversation with someone and say, oh, it's because I'm worried about having a seizure, or I'm worried about my epilepsy, people could just think, oh, why is she moving mad? Why doesn't she want to come to something? Or why isn't she going to the shop? Or someone that doesn't know you at all, and you're like standing far away from the edge of the road, and then they're standing behind you thinking, why is she not like move forward? Those kind of things. I think I struggle with people that don't know me, their potential perception of me having epilepsy, and then what that means for me going forward.
Yeah, so you have this, everyone would need to upload instantly the information, so you wouldn't have to like explain it to everyone each time, like just a little update, people. But it must be it must be tiring. And yeah, just before you gave all this explanation, I had no idea about the mental space it can occupy in your brain and your heart, your feelings. And so of course it's going to change the way you react. And yeah, people can't understand, but you can't be mad at them for not knowing if they don't know. And it must be tiring. Yeah. Well, I don't know in this situation, is there any like changes in people who have epilepsy? Like, can they have it less and less often, or is it usually how it starts? It's the same frequency, or you just never know?
I think it's different. It's a case by case thing. I think essentially the neurologist just gives you anti-epileptic drugs and tries to make sure you don't have any seizures, or they're not as frequent. On medication, I don't seem to have seizures if I'm consistently taking them. My thing was I didn't want to take them because in my mind I wasn't accepting that there was something wrong. I just was like, oh, it happened, but it's not going to continue to happen. But I think I've had to come to terms,
Mm-hmm.
actually, this is a condition that you're probably going to have to live with. So you're probably going to be on medication for the rest of your life. There are things that you can do that will probably help reduce the impact, of you having a seizure.
Mm-hmm.
So like changing your diet, being more active, and those things definitely help. But yeah, I think it's a case by case. Like, no, anybody that I've spoken to hasn't experienced it the same way.
Yeah.
And when I first had a seizure and the ambulance were called, the lady said that everybody is likely to have at least one seizure in their life. Like, it's not uncommon, but obviously
Okay.
more than one means that there is a condition or there is something. And then the way those seizures look, again, they could be different. You could completely like zone out and make it, and it could look like you're
Mm-hmm.
daydreaming, or you could have a full-on fit where you're on the floor and your body's shaking, possibly foaming at the mouth, and completely black out. Like, there are different types of seizures
Mm-hmm.
that you can have. And even when I said, to like people that I was close to or that I knew that I had seizures, loads of people have like, oh my God, that happened to me. I had a seizure, or my friend also has seizures. And it was like, oh right, I didn't even know it was that common, because it's not something that people
Yeah.
talk about. So yeah, there's been comfort in that I'm not the only one, but then there's also been the process of accepting that I now have epilepsy.
Yeah, and you do sound like a very powerful woman. So when I hear you looking for patterns and everything and analyzing, so things can change. So this must be a big challenge in your life. But you also seem to have the wisdom to observe yourself with your how you can better go through these moments and how it's better for you to think about it. But yeah, when we talk with others, that's when we realize that, oh, okay, now this is a new topic to me, but there are others who experience the same. And I actually talked with a guy a few years ago who works in impact gaming, and they were working on a game for the at first they thought it was for people with epilepsy, and they thought this was gonna help them learn the nice tips of behaving when they have situations. But then they realized that it was helping more the people around the people with epilepsy rather than the people themselves, because they all knew that it was so important that they had to learn. But it was their friends, families, coworkers who actually had no idea, and who were freaking out and not being helpful. And so, what do you think about these types of things? Like, is impact gaming something you're familiar with or interested in? I don't know.
I've never even heard of it, to be fair. That's the first time that I've heard of it, but I think it would definitely be a good thing to implement within, because I think that most places of work, most friends and family, if you've not been exposed to something, you wouldn't know. Your
Yeah.
initial reaction when somebody is having a seizure, like I had a seizure in front of some people that I was working with once, and
Mm-hmm.
their initial reaction was to talk to me, because apparently I was getting up and coming down and getting up and coming down, but I wasn't
Okay.
aware of it at all. I wasn't awake. I completely blacked out.
Yeah.
So they were talking to me and trying to tell me stuff. It was a video call, so they didn't have an understanding of how to
How to
react,
help. Yeah.
how
Mm-hmm.
to help. And I think if I was in front of like friends and family, I don't definitely know, but I've told them not to do this, to be fair, is that they would think to run to me to try and grab me or try and hold me or something, when actually you just need to make sure that I don't hit my head against anything, fall on anything,
Yeah.
and that I'm not a danger to myself. Don't put anything in my mouth, because any time that I've had a seizure, I bite down very heavily on my tongue to either have scars or sometimes bleed. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of my friends saying, "Oh, should you put a spoon in your mouth or something?" I'm like, "No, because then what? I might choke." Like, don't put anything in my
Yeah.
mouth. You just need to make sure that I can't initially hurt myself while it's
Yeah.
happening, and hopefully it doesn't last too long. But yeah, that impact thing sounds like it would be great to educate people on what to do and
Yeah.
how to handle it.
Yeah. It's really interesting because this the games can really create immersion and put you in situations to learn behavior, and there are some cool statistics about it. But I also wanted to ask you, like, we're talking about things that are that we've situations in which we have felt vulnerable. And when you get to know someone new, because you in your work line also you must be talking to a lot of people when they're not sure of their worth, but they want things, so it's a lot of things going up and down. How do you make someone feel safe to really actually open up? Have you learned a few things that you could share with us about how to create that safe space for someone you don't know to feel like they can tell you how they really feel and who they really are?
Yeah, I don't think there is one way to do it, and I think contrary to maybe how I come across, I'm an introvert, so I don't really like talking to people. Like I'm not,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not someone that like will just go up to people and start talking. If people talk to me, then I'm fine. But I'm very shy. Well, I don't know if shy is a real. I don't think people would describe me as shy, but I'm just not an outwardly go up to people type person. Like I feel nervous about doing stuff like that. And I think when you're in a senior leadership position and you need to kind of set the tone for that, it's about trying to think of what that person would appreciate in this instance. So if you can see that somebody is shy, going over and saying hello to them might make them feel comfortable. And then starting with the normal questions like, if they're new to the business or if they're new to this, oh, where have you come from? As in, what area do you live in? What's your job? Trying to find some kind of commonality that you can both speak on, I find really helps. For me, I think generally I'm quite really good at interpersonal skills. So I try and not be stuffy in any way, shape, or form. Maybe try and bust a little joke. Try and see if we have a similar type of sense of humor. Sometimes that doesn't work because people are kind of nervous and you don't have the same sense of humor. So then it's about just finding something that you have in common where somebody feels comfortable to just answer you. Because you have to realize not everybody's going to want to be a friend. Not everybody's going to want to talk. Some people are quite comfortable to just be left alone and be by themselves. And it's like reading body language, picking up vibes from people, kind of understanding. Do they feel comfortable in this conversation? Are they okay to be left alone? Do they want to talk to more people? Do they want me to introduce them to some other people in the room so that they have other people that they are maybe more connected to or can be more connected to? Because I'm not going to be for everybody. Everybody's not going to be for me. So yeah, I think it's about, I don't think there is one way to interact with somebody. It's about doing something initially, picking up the vibe and then going from there kind of thing. But you also have to be mindful that you can't take things personally. If somebody doesn't want to talk, it's not about you.
You tried.
If somebody is like, if someone's a real talker and then all of a sudden starts reeling off their whole life story, being patient and listening to them, because that might be a nervous reaction. So just adapting to the kind of environment that you're in, really.
It's really a dance, you're telling us. It's like but I think the hardest thing is reading the body language, because the rest, you hear words, you can analyze words and answer to that, but I feel like there is a part of it that's a bit natural gift. You have it or you don't. But yeah, it's thank you for sharing this, because I think learning to build those bridges, but also the let go, if it doesn't work, just let it go, is also very precious. Yeah. And so what's going on in your professional life right now? Are there any like projects that you're excited about in these topics? Like what's exciting in 2024 for you?
I think this year communication is something that I really want to explore, like different ways to communicate. I think language and communication has been, I think people look at the outcomes more than how we get there. So people, like businesses, can be like, we want to increase representation or we want to have a policy, etc. But then the language that they use, and I think I've said this throughout my whole career, the language that they use others people in such a way that it puts them in a box. So you are considered an ethnic minority, you're considered underrepresented, you're considered from a low socioeconomic background. Like this language puts you in a box that makes you feel less than. Like I'm an individual, as much as I'm a Black woman or I'm Jamaican or I'm Black British. Those labels were given to me by somebody else. So now when you think about my own experience, you're thinking about the label. You're not thinking about Dionne the person. So then for like any Black woman to be a spokeswoman for all Black women, like that's not true. We don't all have the same experience. We don't all live the same way. So I think language and communication is something that I really want to explore, and narratives and understanding nuance, because everything that happens in diversity tends to be in comparison to whiteness or centering white experience, when actually what we want to do is just bring forth everybody's experience, so people have an understanding how people experience life, how people experience communication, professions, etc., not just their existences are comparable to a white person's existence. Like our existence shouldn't be the comparable. I understand why it is. I understand why we're using that as a comparable.
Yeah.
Obviously, whiteness has been like at the forefront for many years.
Yeah.
But the way in which it's done, the way in which we are described, so underrepresented, ethnic minority, it still puts us at the back of the experience. It doesn't really bring forth our own experience without thinking about that, and our own experience still exists. So if white people didn't exist, or they weren't the comparable, our experience would still exist. And it's like, how do we bring forth that narrative? How do we control our own narrative so that people understand where we're coming from in the same way? But yeah, I think a lot of the way in which diversity and inclusion is communicated, kind of, how would you break out of that? How would you break out of the box? Everything is about a box that you fit in. Everything is about trying to educate people instead of just accept people. So how do we change those narratives that it's more sustainable and it isn't bringing out defensive reactions consistently, because people feel like, well, if your experience is this, well, my experience, like, it's not a battle, it's not an argument. I'm just saying that I also have an experience. My experience is
coexisting,
and I want to change that experience. You can still have your experience, but my experience is different to yours. Like, how do we change those narratives? And I think narratives is very important, because who controls your narrative? Who has decided who you are, what you can do, how you're going to be? Who controls that narrative? Do you control your own narrative as a community, as an individual? Like, what does that mean? And I learned a really interesting fact on TikTok the other day that said, what percentage of the world's population is Black? Now, I don't know if they mean Black like me, or they just mean not white, but it said it was 68% of the world's population was Black. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah, the numbers compared to what we're living is sometimes they're really crazy, and yeah, language is really important, because again, I remember when I was a kid having some parents trying to be really nice, and like when they ever said like, oh, I love Turkish people, I always felt like a type of poodle or something. Like, I was like, how can you love Turkish people? I know horrible ones and very good ones, and like there are so many of us. and I never could fully explain, like, because I knew they were trying to be kind, and yeah, narratives and words are so important. But yeah, and when you talk about language, there's also something I wanted to talk about with you, because I saw one of your interviews, and you were talking about this, because I spent around 10 years being in communication and working with brands, and at some point in my career, I think it was 5-6 years later, I was like, we call ourselves communication experts, but we're actually really bad at communicating with each other. Because I mean, in advertising agencies and like in those brainstorming rooms, meeting rooms, I was like, I mean, communication, it's about words, it's about emotions, it's about how you function together. It's not just about which words you put on an ad so people will buy. And nowadays I'm seeing this people wanting to do the right thing about diversity, but they're also like, I also don't want to put one of everything, like one of every type of people in a print, just to be like, okay, check. But What's your advice to those who want to do the right thing and not turn it into just a checkbox? And now we are obliged to have 7 people because there are 7 categories of things to represent. Like, what would you tell a brand about that?
I think that the brands have to accept that they need to really understand what they're trying to achieve. So what things are going to look like for the audience that they're trying to engage with. And I think that having one of everything doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work. But it's more about what your narrative is. Like, what message are you trying to get across? Are you trying to change people's perception? Are you trying to engage people's perception? One of the adverts that I really liked, but I saw it get a lot of backlash, was Sainsbury's. They did a Christmas advert a few years ago, and it was about the Christmas experience, Christmas family experience, and it had loads of different adverts of different types of family. So there was a black family, there was a white family, single parent family, friends family type of thing. And the black family one got loads of backlash, not blacklash, but got loads of backlash where people were like, I can't identify with this doesn't represent me. And it's like, everybody needs to see themselves in an advert, and that's not true. Like, I can watch an advert that doesn't have a black woman in it and not think, why am I not in there? Because you're trying to relay an experience. But the idea that black people or Asian people or gay people have completely different experiences is wild to me. So it's more about, what experience are you trying to get across? Is it the experience of love? If it's love, loads of different types of people fall in love. So it isn't like, what narrative are you trying to change? Are you trying to change narrative? Are you trying to engage new audiences? Are you trying to welcome new people? Or are you trying to reinforce stereotypes? So if you think about positive things and healthy families, and you always see a traditional man, woman, 2.4 kids and a dog, what narrative are you trying to reinforce? Like, it's about representation definitely plays a part, but it's about what experience, what feeling are you trying to generate? Are you working with today's society and today's culture, or are you trying to work with something that predates people's mindset of right now? So yeah, I don't think there's an easy way to answer it. I think it's a progression. It isn't just this is the way that you do it. It's a progressive thing. So if you look at your campaign as a whole, so if you know you're working with a brand for the next 3 years or for a year, you have different narratives that are going to have different stories attached to those different narratives for the year.
But I think in what you're saying, it's really cool because you're bringing the focus also on the stereotypes. And I think we need to know the stereotypes also and study them so we can break out of them too, because we have these easy go-tos, I think, in terms of situations that people have lived and stuff. And so just living in the real life and bringing those real feelings and stories that belong to today's world, I guess, is one way to go. And so maybe if you have a little bit more time, just one last question, because I've seen that on Amplified Kin, you've done a lot of interviews. Is there maybe one of those, or even at another moment in your life, doesn't have to be the ones from Amplified Kin, but is there like one conversation that really deeply touched you in the past years when discovering someone new that you'd like to share with us? Because it's all about this being excited about someone's world and difference. Or it can also be someone you don't know and you just read or saw an interview somewhere that really touched you.
I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that everybody has their own struggle and their own journey for things. So I try to not take things at face value. And I think a colleague, like an old manager that I worked with, she is from an Asian background, so she was South Asian, and we would have conversations where we're learning from each other around kind of how people experience life and how we can, you know, work with difference. And we were considered BAME, so Black, Asian, minority ethnic, and we had completely different experiences of work. Like we had completely different perspectives, we had completely different ways of growing up, and it was in that moment I kind of realized we've been grouped together because we're not white, but we don't have the same experience. Like we wouldn't be having the same challenges. And conversations like that really stick with me to understand a nuance, like understand the difference, and don't just accept the group that you've been placed in. It's much deeper than that. Individual experience counts. Collective experience is something, but your collective experience doesn't necessarily bring you together. There still has to be something that you have in common. And then I take massive inspiration from Beyonce, which sounds cheesy, but I really love her determination and her drive. And when you see some of the things that she talks about in documentaries about pushing forward and having to break down barriers and understanding that there are privileges in certain things that she has. Like most people might think you don't have, like, there's a narrative that as a Black person you don't have privilege, but there are privileges that you do have. They won't be the same as other demographics, but there are certain privileges that you do have based on the country that you live in, or based on the education that you've had. So there are privileges that you do have, and it's actually looking at what I can do to change my own narrative in the same way that Beyonce maybe changed her own narrative, which is why I constantly say Beyonce wasn't built in a day. I don't expect that if I say, you know, I've made this awakening or realization on Monday, that by Friday everything's going to be fixed. It's a process. It's a learning curve. It's perception. It's communication. Like it's a whole ecosystem of change, not just I've said it so it is type of thing. But then in terms of
love it.
Work experience, like people's working experience, I think that I drew a lot, like, so when I worked at Hearst, we did like things for Black History Month, and there was people within the fashion industry that I'd never heard of, like the first Black model from like the 1960s, and learning about her experience and how she had determination and drive to do things. It inspired me to be like, you know what, there is still, people have pioneered change and pioneered ways for us to experience life the way in which we experience now that we have no clue of. And one of the reasons why Black History Month is very important to me, and I love to make sure that we are able to learn more about people that came before us, because the Black narrative isn't just about trauma or struggle. There is much more pioneering things that have happened within our community. So I think every day I learn something about, you know, change, challenge that affects how I see the world and how I interact with people.
And I guess that's where the celebration starts, because like you can finally, of course, there's a lot to say about trauma. There's a lot to say about the pains and sufferings, but making space for the beautiful and unique culture and creativity and everything, that's when you actually start to show how worthy of love everyone is in their different ways. And yeah, this was a very, very fun conversation. I just loved it, and I could go for hours, but I know you're an important person. So I'm just going to thank you. Sorry?
We're all important people.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the perfect conclusion to this conversation. Thank you so much, Dionne, for making time. And I hope to talk to you soon again. Take very good care of yourself, and see you soon, maybe.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.